Hello, beautiful people. I'm recording this on Thanksgiving, so first of all, happy Thanksgiving to you. Appreciate you listening from the bottom of my heart, and I'm super grateful and thankful for you. Today's guest is Harry Dry. He's the creator of marketingexamples.com, and if you're a writer, a marketer, you sell stuff on the internet, or you have any desire to in the future, you should one, check out Harry's work, and two, you're going to really enjoy this conversation. Harry's the perfect example of when talent combines itself with good intent, and you'll see in his writing, you'll see in this conversation, he's just someone who is pursuing the highest version of himself, and you'll see all the ways he's doing that. This was such an incredible conversation with Harry. I'm so blessed to be able to have spoken to him, and I'm really grateful for our time. Hopefully you guys enjoy this conversation as much as I enjoyed it. And if you do enjoy it, or if you don't, let me know on Twitter at HeyDannyMiranda. Let me know what you think of the episode. Let me know your feedback, because that's what I love to hear. And now, let's get right into the episode with Harry Dry.
Interesting people, thought-provoking conversations, nutrition for your brain. Journey through the minds of the world's top performers and discover what it really takes to achieve your highest version. This is the Danny Miranda Podcast.
Why don't you break down the Kanye story for us real quick so we can use that as a launch pad?
Kanye story. So it's a long story, so feel free to jump in at any point, but I'll give it to you from the top of my head. So I was working, actually no, I wasn't. I finished university and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I learned coding. I went to Israel and I learned a couple of coding languages, came back to the UK, and I wanted to start up businesses. That was like my goal. So I set up a first one, like a Canvas project, which didn't go too well. Then I started making websites for musicians, which again didn't go too well. So the lessons I got from those two projects was that you need to validate an idea instead of just rushing in full steam ahead and throwing instead of assuming that people want to buy your product or use your product, you need to actually test the waters, and you can do that cheaply and effectively. So I was just in my bed on Twitter one night and I saw this dating site for Donald Trump fans taking off and going viral. And I thought, it's really smart because they're just hijacking Trump's audience. They're just leveraging all of Trump's audience and building on top of that. So I thought, who could I do this for? Massive Kanye West fan, I'll do it for him. So I didn't want to build a whole dating site though, because that's like 5 months work and maybe no one wants to use the site in the first place. So I just, the next day, actually no, straight on that day, I jumped out of bed and I bought the domain yeezy.dating. And it was only like a tenner because for some reason .dating domains are really cheap. So I had this domain, and then the next day I put up a really simple landing page, which basically said, a dating site for fans of the genius Mr. Kanye West. P.S. Taylor Swift fans are banned from this website. And I just popped it on Reddit, on the Kanye subreddit, and said, I'm building a dating site for Kanye fans. You can sign up now for sort of early access or like get on the pre-launch list. And then I started getting a list of journalists together. And I emailed all these journalists, really short email I just wrote. I found them all there's a site called BuzzStream where you can find journalists. So I typed in Kanye West and you find loads of these journalists. So the site was doing really well on Reddit. It had like 500 upvotes, but that's not really enough to, build a whole dating site. You need more than 500 people. So I sent to all these journalists, and the next day I was doing like a bit of part-time work, I guess, at some, I was doing like a bit of web development work on the side to make some money. And in this meeting, my phone starts ringing, turn it off, turn it to silent, rings again. And I get back home, and on the pre-launch list for this dating site, there's I think it was like 10,000 people have signed up for the pre-launch. And then I refreshed it and it's like 10,050. And then I Googled Kanye West's name, and this dating site, which I haven't even built at all, is just everywhere online. It's like someone's building a dating site for Kanye fans. Kanye's building a dating site for Kanye fans, like all of this stuff. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm so out of my depth here. And then I spoke to my dad, and he was like, "Oh, Harry, they're going to sue you so badly. You're not allowed to use Kanye's name for a project or whatever." I just thought, I'm going to soldier on, see what happens. So the next day, I called this web development thing I was doing a bit of work for. And actually, I was on the train, and a friend texted me and said, like, BBC Radio 1, like really big station in the UK, wants to talk to the creator of this website. But I couldn't get any signal on the train, so I couldn't get through to them and big up the site and kind of tell them what I was trying to build. So that was the final straw, and I told the web development company, like, I've just got to leave and do my best to promote this, to build this website. Problem was, I really didn't know much about coding, so I had done like a few months out in Israel, but I just stuck to it. And 3 months later, I kind of had like a version 1 of the dating site ready to go, and I've been building like a little bit of hype on Instagram, and media things have still kept on coming in, like asking where the dating site is. So put the site up, posted on Instagram, sent an email to my email list. The site's live, Kanye Dating's live. And then 100 and 200 people are joining. And I'm thinking, wow, this is crazy. This is insane. Something I've built, real people are using. I'm on the dating site myself, and I'm like getting likes from girls who like the college dropout. It was a really cool experience. And then suddenly, one by one, the images on the site start disappearing. And I kept refreshing the site, and more images are disappearing. And I somehow managed to build a dating site which doesn't properly save images. So within 20 minutes, it's a dating site with hundreds and hundreds of profiles and no images. So I put out some announcement saying that like there was too many people on or whatever, and the site's coming back in 3 days. So I just messaged. I was on these web development forums talking to all these people and explaining that I had a product which actually people seem to want to use, but I just couldn't figure out how to save images properly on a dating website. Fortunately, there was a couple of developers who helped me out. We got the site back live, and it's kicking in gear again. And for a couple of weeks, it was great. It was really great, and I'm getting like really lovely emails from people saying they're going on real Yeezy dates and stuff, and it was really cool. But then I started realizing that like I don't know much about marketing, and it's just me trying to do all this stuff, trying to fix the bugs, trying to reply to the support emails, trying to do all that stuff, and growth slowing down. Like I had the media buzz at the start, but ultimately, things don't market themselves, and the media had got bored of it to a degree. So I kind of thought like I need something big here to save a day, because I'm just one person trying to run a full-on dating site. It's just not gonna work. So I thought, what if I try to get Kanye West involved? So I thought like I could, write a song. I was just thinking of ideas, and I thought, why don't I take out billboards around the world saying, because Kanye said he was opening up offices in London, Wyoming, Calabasas, and New York. So I thought, what about if I put billboards in all these locations saying, phone me, Kanye West, followed by my phone number? I've got ideas, might get his attention. So I called up the billboard companies, and really surprisingly, billboards are actually dead cheap. It was like £1,000. I think it was about, I can't remember exactly, like 1,700 for all these billboards, for free billboards, because we didn't do Calabasas. And I had these. Then I thought, I've got to get the pictures. So the billboards went up live, and I wasn't in any of these locations. So I emailed the Yeezy Dating users and was like, if anyone's in New York, can you just take a picture quickly, send it to me, and we'll get it off to the media. So then did all this story and sent this stuff to the press, like this kid's trying to get in contact with Kanye about his dating site. And I got like another big spike, but Kanye never called. And actually, a couple of weeks later, I got an email I did get an email from his CFO wanting to talk to me. So I spoke to him, and he was a lovely guy, but I think I kind of missed the moment slightly with him on the phone. I'm not sure. And then, long story short, the site went on for another 6 to 7 months, kind of successfully, but ultimately it didn't quite make it. But it was a weird experience. I think I was like 21 or 22 at the time, and going to like mass, it generally, I'm not over exaggerating, like kind of mass media attention when I was so clueless about what I was doing. It was a real experience, and having thousands of users on a dating site, trying to sort of manage that from someone who, wasn't really ready for it. It definitely leveled me up a bit in certain areas. but ultimately didn't like come to anything major.
Wow, man. It's a crazy story when I was reading it, and it's even crazier hearing you talk about it. But a couple of things stuck out to me, and you didn't really mention this part in what you were just telling, but I really wanted to touch on it because it was so interesting to me when I was reading the story. And that is that of your dad's encouragement. And you mentioned this twice. When you mentioned once that your dad said you've got to think on a bigger scale. And then you also mentioned that your dad bought you 3 alarm clocks. One set to New York time zone, one to LA, and one to Wyoming. I was like, oh my God. Like, and your dad tells you, you've got to know your time zone, son. I don't know. Like, this is an incredible, the fact that your dad is bringing you up and thinking that you could actually do this and telling you to think bigger really stuck out to me. So talk a little bit about you and your dad's relationship and
Thanks,
what,
man.
Talk about that.
No, God, I'm really flattered you brought that up. Really, I did miss that off. There's a lot. It's quite a long story, to be honest with you. I could. Okay, so with my dad, he used to work as he used to work in radio. He used to be like a radio presenter, and he's one of those fathers I'm incredibly grateful for, that he went from day zero. He always said to me, like, you can do anything you want. That was just you can be anything you want. And it's a small thing, but it generally does twist your mindset in a certain way. It wires you in a slightly different way. So I told my dad about the idea. Actually, I told my dad I was going to do some bullshit. Like, I told him I was going to try and write something shit like that, and he was like, that sucks. You've got to go big to get Kanye's busy. You got to go big to get his attention. But the thing with my dad in this story mainly was, I missed off this time, but basically, I called up these billboard companies, and the billboards were all going to go live at, I think it was like 7 p.m. In British time. And basically, just before they were going to go live, I got an email from the company Lamar, who was providing the free billboards in America. And they told me, we can't put the billboards up because it's a violation of Kanye West's privacy, because you're using his name in the billboard. And I was thinking, like, damn, I've already got one in London about to go up, and I can't pull that out. So I'm just going to have one, and it's not really a big enough story. But at the same time, I was thinking, this saves me, because I was pretty nervous about putting up these billboards. I kind of knew that it would be media attention and stuff like that. So at the same time, I was thinking, like, oh, this is my way out. But anyway, I went downstairs and told my dad, like, the billboards can't go up because they've told us that we can't do it. And he was like, he'd been around the block, and he was like, oh no, we'll find a way of getting this working. So he started pretending to be a journalist, a BBC journalist. And he started calling up the billboard companies saying, I'm a BBC journalist. We're covering this story about this young boy who's putting up these billboards around the world. And he's just informed us that the stunt's no longer going live. And unfortunately, that means that, like, we need to investigate this further. Can we talk to, like, management? And maybe the story's about you and how you're blocking this, and you've only given him like 20 minutes notice. And eventually we hammered away at this company Lamar for about 40 minutes, and we got through to the CEO of Lamar on the phone. And finally we come to a compromise where we could say, phone me Mr. West instead of Kanye West. And it is one of those things where, if by myself, I generally probably wouldn't have got to that stage. I'd have probably said, like, I probably would have given up at that point, and having him just be like, oh no, we're going to figure this out. And it went on for so long, and we did figure it out. The other thing as well, I missed this off, but it's just relevant with my dad, was basically that all the press went out and Kanye didn't get in touch at that point. And then basically my dad again said, no, we're not giving up at this point. What we're going to do is, it was his idea. He told me, what you should do is you should just call companies nearby the Yeezy offices and tell them what you're doing. And if anyone knows anyone who's working at Yeezy, could you just let them know this is all going on? So he gave me these numbers, and we called up a bunch of companies nearby the Yeezy office in LA. And on like the 5th try, we got through to someone who did know someone who worked for Yeezy. So then she passed on the message to someone who worked for Yeezy, Kanye's company, which then got through to the CFO. So that's actually how we made the link. And it was funny that we tried everything, like with the media and this big campaign, but ultimately it was just picking up the phone and making the call, which did it.
Yeah, man. It's actually incredible the lengths that you went to make this happen. And it just makes me think that you were so steadfast in your vision, or you and your dad were so steadfast in the vision that this was going to happen and that this was going to get the attention of someone at Kanye West's company. So my question is, why, what made your dad so sure that this was going to happen, or what made you so sure that this was going to happen in terms of that complete and utter confidence in yourself and your vision?
So what it was I was trying to talk myself out of this. I basically thought, like, I've got this dating site and I've put in 4 months work into building it, and it's going well. Like, there's a bit of buzz, but it's going to die unless I can get the big man Kanye involved. So I was thinking, why aren't I going to take this risk and try and get Kanye involved? Okay, what's the reason? So I thought about it rationally, and I was like, okay, well, it's money at the end of the day, isn't it? Because it's 2 months' wages or whatever. It's like $2.5 grand, which is a lot of money for me, and still is, to be honest. So then I thought, but it's not really money, is it? Because at the end of the day, like, in 50 years' time, hopefully 2.5 grand will be like, not as much as it was back then. So it's not the money. So what is it? Why don't I want to do this? Like, that's what I kept coming back to. And the reason was purely because I was just afraid. Rationally, it made complete sense. Maybe there's like a 20% chance that Kanye takes a meeting with me or he backs the site. And we got close. So we spoke to his right-hand man. And I got really, really close. It didn't quite come off. But so there's a 20% chance that Kanye goes with it. So why aren't I doing it? And it's just, I'm afraid of doing it and afraid of being in the spotlight. So then I thought, that's not a good enough reason. You can't just back out of it because you're afraid. That's not who I really want to be. So that's how I talked myself into it. I thought that there you go.
Makes sense. And I love that you brought up just that 2.5 grand is very a significant amount of money to you today, but you believe in your future it won't be, because it makes me think of something you wrote in your book, consumersbook.net, of just how when Steve Jobs was sitting down and would be sitting down with his friends and they'd be talking and his friends would say, like, you can't do that, or he would say, like, yeah, but Henry Ford did it, right? And so you gave this example and I was really touched and really thought about, oh, wow, like, this Harry Dry, he's got as big of a vision as I do, So that's how it made me think. And talk a little bit about your big vision because it seems like, from my perspective, that you view yourself in a different way than you appear in this moment, and that's commendable because a lot of people don't think that way. So talk to me about your big vision.
Well, firstly, I have no idea how you found that book because it's been taken off. Like, I'm not even promoting that book now. So I'm impressed that you've found that out. I'm planning to relaunch that in like 10 years when it's going to be the first thing I ever did. I have no idea how you tracked it down, but fair play. So I think the main thing is you got to earn your stripes. So it sounds like a lot of bullshit for me to come on this podcast and be like, oh, I want to do X, Y, and Z, because at the end of the day, like, if I'm good enough, I'll do it, and if I'm not good enough, I won't. But in terms of a bigger vision, I think that I'm running like a marketing website right now, which I hope in next year will have made enough money for me to not have crazy money problems. I'm still in a lucky position where I'm young. I don't have like a family to support, so I can take risks maybe which you can't take at a level if I had kids, for example, which is a real blessing. So I think hopefully when that stuff's worked out, money-wise, I want to move more into writing / making videos, I suppose. And I think there's a bigger issues which I'd like to sort of tackle. So I think a bigger issue perhaps is the education system. Not a massive fan of the way universities are done. I also think there's big problems with phones and how they kind of control our self-esteem, and the way we're all brainwashed a bit by, whatever the YouTube or Twitter algorithms just shoving in front of you. And probably as well, I think politics is also incredibly screwed up in the sense that it's just like morons just arguing right now. So I think look, it's not really on the forefront of my mind right now, but in 20 years time, I think I'd quite like to go very deep into one of those industries, and perhaps there'd be like some kind of startup, or maybe I would just like to have a platform where I could, I don't know, get my thoughts across. But at the same time, there's no grand plan right now at all. I'm making it up as I go along, and it's step by step. Like, there's no point me talking about all that, because at the end of the day, I've still got to make enough money to be able to like work on all that stuff anyway. So I'm very much focused on the here and now, and the here and now is just earn my stripes right now and make a business which makes, I don't know, 500,000, $1 million. That would be great. More than great. And that would be, so that's where we're at right now. And I don't want to get too far in the future. It's like, you're talking to, I had an interview with Roger Federer today, and he was like, when I started playing tennis, I just wanted to win one Grand Slam. So in my career, I'm not even close to winning one Grand Slam yet. So, 50 years down the road, who knows? But I've just got to take it day by day.
Dude, I love that. And I also love that you brought up what you're currently working on right now, because it gives me a great segue to ask about marketing examples. And it's such a fascinating site to me, because to me, it doesn't look like anything that I've seen before. It doesn't operate like anything I've seen before. And there's so many different things I want to ask you about it. But just to start, what gave you the idea to start it, and how has that changed? How has your vision for it changed, as if at all, from when you started it to today?
All right, so just to fill anyone in, who 99% of people will not have heard of this website. So it's just basically a place where you can go to get marketing inspiration. It's like Dribbble for marketers. You go onto the site, and you're trying to come up with viral marketing campaigns, for example. You click on the viral button, and there's a bunch of examples of campaigns which have sort of went viral, or brands, or even celebrities, and how they've done it, like breaking it down. So it's just loads of real world marketing examples. So I got the idea. I was watching this. Well, actually, there's two things. I was seeing what this guy called Steve Shoga, is a really good UX designer. And on Twitter, he was presenting design in a way that no one had done before remotely. So it's quite hard to explain, but he got really technical with it. He made these incredibly easy to consume diagrams where he would show before and afters of sort of a form, for example, with the wrong border, the wrong padding, the wrong color, and then he'd make it like the right color. And it just made design so simple for someone like me who didn't get design. It was like, it's not that technical. You've just got to understand that there's sort of patterns you can follow. So I thought, what if someone does a similar thing, at least on social media, for marketing, where they can take things which are typically presented in kind of 1,000, 2,000 word articles, really hard to consume, wrote essentially to rank on SEO, to sort of wrote for Google. What if you took all that information, which is digested for Google, and just condensed it into like what real people actually want? So, for example, there's I did one about Burger King sponsoring Stevenage FC. And if someone was writing that article, like if you paid some freelance marketing writer to write that article, they'd spit back like 2,000 words, and they're just filling because they got to hit a quota of words. But you don't have to. That article should be 5 lines. It's really simple, and you can explain it in 5 lines. So I saw a gap. I just saw a gap of marketing writers doing everything for Google, not for real people. And the other idea, I guess, was I saw all these design inspiration galleries where you could go to check out landing page design, but there was nothing like that for marketing. Marketing had always been quite an inaccessible industry. It was sort of like, I don't know. Yeah, that's it, I guess. That's where the idea came from.
Makes a lot of sense. And to go and follow up, has the vision changed from when you started to today? Is it the same vision? Yeah, so I think someone messaged me the other day, and I think that one of the reasons why it's went well is that I said to them, like, they were like, why don't you start a podcast? And I said that one of the reasons why Marketing Examples has went well is for the exact reason that I don't have a podcast. I tried a couple of little bits on YouTube, and then I backed out.
it's just been the same thing for a year and a half. And what I've noticed is consistency compounds. And if people are there's a newsletter which goes out like every week. And if you can, sometimes I miss the week, but if you can hit it week after week after week consistently, providing a great article, you get noticed. And if you're scattergun, if you're like jumping around onto TikTok, onto YouTube, onto podcast, you lose that kind of vision. Just, I think if you can do one thing really, really well, that's what people want. They want, there's so much mediocrity. And if you can just focus and get one thing right, there's a gap there. So the vision hasn't changed actually at all. I've done the same thing for a year and a half every single week. And it's been, the success in a way is that it's been that boring. I could have been tempted so easily by brand partnerships or setting up an agency or, stuff like that. But I resisted all of that. I think it's important.
Yeah, that's such a good point and so important. And you kind of touched on something that I saw you wrote and I read last night, which was that there's on the internet, you can only there's a fight for our attention, and it's the best content that gets our attention. So, and the rest of the almost great content doesn't really get any attention at all. So talk a little bit about that, and you probably have thought about this way more than I have, but I thought that point was so interesting, and I thought it applies to so many different areas, and I think that it's a really important point.
So I agree. I think that, look, there's literally billions of blogs, podcasts, websites out there, and it's 98% goes unnoticed. It gets swallowed up and it just doesn't get any attention. So if you can push yourself somehow into the 1-2%, then it's winner takes all. Then you're like a Joe Rogan. And it takes time, and it's consistency which compounds over time. But I'll give you a real example from my position. So originally, you say, has the site changed? It changed a bit. Originally, I was writing articles like one every couple of days, trying to pump them out a bit quicker. And just because I thought that's what people wanted. I thought I needed to like make my Twitter look busy and all that nonsense. And then there was a turning point. I wrote this one about copywriting where I went into it and said to myself, I want to write the best article on copywriting on the internet by a mile. I don't even want it to be comparable. I don't want it to be so. And to do that, I guess what I'll experiment and see what happens. And it meant that instead of doing it in 2 days, it took me like 2.5 weeks. And what I did was I took a bunch of courses on copywriting. I didn't know anything about copywriting really before like taking this on. I took 2 courses and I read 4 or 5 books recommended by someone called Dave Gerhardt, who's like a marketer I really respect. And I condensed these courses and these books into 17 of the best tips, practical tips I could find, which they wrote about in their courses and their books. And I applied like images, before and after images to all of these tips to illustrate them. And it was really short. It was like all of this masses of material just boiled down into something incredibly short and to the point. And the experiment was wild. So I put this article out, and it must have returned about 3,000, 4,000 new email subscribers. So normally per article for me, it's like 100, 200 is a good return on an article. And in terms of this one was 4,000. So I spent 2.5 weeks instead of 2 or 3 days. But my return, so I've spent like 4 times the time, but my return is like 25 times. So that's what happens when you get into the top 1%. And with this article, this one I put out is also, Google also put it at number 1 for a bit. It's still like Google changes up their algorithm a lot to test. But there was a period last week where it was number 1 for the term copywriting tips. And again, if you get number 1 on Google, then you consistently get like organic traffic. And I've been sharing this same article on LinkedIn and on Twitter, Instagram, places like that. And it's just returned so much more than I ever would have got by putting out something average. So since that article, I was like, all right, what if I just every single time I publish something on the newsletter, I try and make it the best article on marketing like that week. That's the new goal. And if you just build that reputation for quality up, and then next thing you know, one of my friends got me doing this talk at a company called Trends, and I did this talk in front of their audience, and then they put it around the email called the Hustle newsletter. And then in one day, just from this, I'm getting like 2,000 new subscribers to my email list just from this one email. And I'm never going to be put on that email list as like a featured thing, like something you should check out, unless what I've made is really good. So I just clocked that like there's no market for average. If you're going to try and break in, like it really does help to be amazing. It's winner takes all.
Harry, you're making me rethink my content strategy because for the past 6 months, I've put out 2 articles a week, but I haven't spent the time that you have on that one single article. But
it's different. It's contextual. So like, give you an example is podcasts are different. I think that's more a function of like personality and time and improvement. So look at Joe Rogan. He's like someone who just chains them up. They go and it works. It's different to you don't, when you're talking to guests, you don't have to put in like, you've done great research for this interview, for example, but like everything in marketing is contextual. I was trying to write an article about copywriting, which is winner takes all because Google organic search will put one thing at number one. But for you, it's like, you can take more of a Joe Rogan approach where if you're like easy to listen to and people like listening to the podcast, it's consistency which counts for you, I think. I don't think it's like you should always take this approach by any means.
I love the nuance you just brought to that discussion. Thank you for providing that, my man. Switching gears slightly I saw that you mentioned in one of your comments on a Reddit or a Hacker News AMA that you did stand-up comedy one time. So,
fuck, man, you've done well. Done well. I wrote that once. Yeah, I did that.
Yeah, so talk to me about your stand-up comedy and what that taught you, because I thought this was so fascinating that you did this and took this on for basically no reason, it seems like, from your comment. But I'd love to hear more about that story.
I've got a lot of time for the research you've done, man. All right, so comedy. Basically, I finished university and I did my exams a bit earlier than my friends for some reason. So I had nothing to do. Like they were all going out and, there was not much going on. So I was learning to code at that time. That was like what I was filling my time with. But I thought, what else can I do in this time? And I didn't do the comedy because I thought I was funny. That's not why I did it. I did it because I thought that if I can take this little step now, this is going to give me so much. Let's say hypothetically, I'm presenting in some. Actually, here's an example. I thought that I did the comedy. I got on stage, and the first one went well. I did 2 more in London, and when one went absolutely awfully, so much so that the MC got on after I did my talk, and he made a joke. He said, that sounds like a weird West Side Story. I told this story, and I don't even to this day know what that meant, but everyone in the audience laughed. And I was thinking like the smallest person in the world because he just made this joke. Everyone laughed about me, and I didn't even know what the joke was. I just felt so stupid, so dumb. And I walked off, and it was, shocking. And I did 1 more in London. So I did 3 in total. And the third one went okay. And then I thought like, I hung up my comedian's hat. But the reason why I did it was purely just because it felt like a hard thing to do at the time, and I thought if I can get up on stage and do comedy, then like maybe I can have the courage to talk to, like, it opens up you can talk to a girl, for example. Maybe it opens up that, or maybe it opens up the possibility for me to put up billboards around the world. Like, it's not, I think the key thing I always go back to is that you can't go from zero to you can't go from someone from zero to putting up 4 billboards around the world asking for a phone call from Kanye West. You have to like build yourself up there. So in hindsight, looking back, like the comedy gave me a feeling that failure is not actually that bad. That's what it taught me. I did really, really badly, genuinely. The second one was so bad, and nothing happened. I just walked off the stage, felt pretty glum, and got on the car, and I didn't get in the car, got on the tube and went back home. And I think that that's a lesson which is a powerful lesson to learn, and it opens up hopefully things down the road. Like, I'll never be afraid of doing a public speaking now, because I can guarantee you comedy is 10 times harder. So it's just the mindset, I guess, of like taking something which feels really difficult and doing it, and then your possibilities just open up.
Did you get the idea to do that from anywhere, or was it just pop into your mind like, oh, this is difficult, I'm going to do this because it's hard? Where did the idea to do that come from?
Weird, actually. Like, I can't remember. I haven't got an answer really. I think I think it was just I wanted to do hard things. I'm not sure if you heard of David Goggins or not.
Oh, of course, my man. David Goggins is my hero.
Really? I like David Goggins. I never had heard of David Goggins before I did this comedy thing. But then I read his book. I'm sure you obviously know all about it. And like that guy had been through stuff which is something I can't even really imagine how hard his life was up to that point. But there is something when you read that book where it's like it's doing hard stuff, or even being forced in his case, because he didn't have a choice. His life just was really, really hard. In a far more harder way than doing comedy. Like that's a totally different playing field to what he had to deal with. But it gets you into like, I mean, feel free to like finish my sentence, but like a mental state where like you get punched and you get back up, and it's just that kind of pattern, which is important in life, I think.
The book that Harry and I are referring to is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. That'll be in the show notes. And it's really interesting when you look at your own life and you ask yourself, where can I do something more difficult? And we always can do something a little more difficult. We can always turn on the shower a little colder. We can always go for that run that we don't want to go on. We could always, do 50 push-ups right now, or do however many push-ups you can do right now to failure. You could do that right now, right? It's always in our wheelhouse. It's always possible, but we always have a million excuses. And so what David Goggins says is he says, screw those excuses. You could do it right now. Like, just do it, make it difficult. And from that difficultness, there'll be some wisdom that comes out of it. And if you do that consistently enough, you find that the difficult, or what you thought was difficult, isn't so bad. And you can keep going, and you can get stronger, and you can get better. And that's what I love about your story is like, you are doing that in a way that's authentic to you, right? Like doing a Kanye West dating site, creating marketing examples, like doing stand-up comedy. These are all things that when you started, I'm sure you didn't look at them as so easy, and you're pursuing them anyways. It's really awesome to see.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think I'm big fan of the book. One thing I've learned, I think, slightly more recently is that like determination and whatnot gets you. It's important, but what's even stronger than that is a sort of system. So like, I'll give you an example. When I was younger, I got up at 6:30 in the morning every single day. I wasn't even that determined. I just got up at 6:30 in the morning every day because there was school and I had to get the train to school. So if I didn't get the train to school, I'd get in trouble. And if I didn't wake up at 6:30, my mum would bang on the door and be like, "You got to get up." So there was just a system in place that got me up at 6:30 every single day. So you can have, this is the distinction I'm making here, is sort of swimming upstream versus swimming downstream. You can be the most determined person in the world, but if you don't have that kind of system in place, it's like you're going upstream. So right now I feel like I'm more determined, but over the last year, I think I've fallen short on a few areas because I haven't had that system. Like I haven't had either accountability or like a way of, or just some sort of fallback system. So more recently, I got in this group with my friend. We're doing this thing called Habit Share. It's like an app, and you see your friends' habits and you see your habits on this app. So you know who's doing what and stuff. And we're doing like this little thing where it's like 15. It's like you buy the delivery for the person who misses more. So the first week I missed a couple, and then this new month, I've missed 2, but I'm been good for like the last 12 days of the month. I've made 11, so I've made 9 days consecutively with my habits. And what we did, which changed I'm not going to go too long-winded on this, but essentially, I guess still like if you can build systems in, whether that be a group with friends where you chat about what you're going to do and they know if you're doing it or not, or if that be you wake your brother up in the morning if you live together and you both go out, work out together, or whatever the hell it is. Systems will always beat someone who's mad determined but just hasn't got that infrastructure. So I don't know. I'm not sure if you've had any similar emotions or anything, but I've just been thinking about that a bit more recently.
Totally agree, my man. And the first thing that pops out to me is, what are the habits that you're tracking these days?
All right. So basically, what we did was when you start with one, and then every new month you add a habit.
I love that. Sorry to interrupt. I love this for such an important reason. I want to underscore it. Is like, you didn't say like, I want to change 10 things at once. When we're successful, we're doing one thing at a time, and then you build on it one at a time after a month. Sorry, continue. I just had to underscore that.
It's a really good point, I think. I'll caveat this with, basically, we started doing habit share last year, and I at that point had work out every single day. Weirdly, we kept it up for like 60 days, and now every single day I'll work out. So that's a habit which isn't on like the habit share app, but it's something which has become, I guess, a habit in my life, so much so that I don't even have to track it, because it's just something which is like automatic. But in terms of what we've got on the app right now, my first one was just meditate for 10 minutes, dead simple. And then that was my first month. And I missed it a few times. And I think what I realized was, if I was doing it in the mornings, it would always feel great. And like, I wanted to be there. If I was doing it in the evenings as like a chore, every of those 10 minutes, I was like, I do not want to be sitting down right now. But hopefully give 6 months time, and it's something I can ramp up even more. And I've done it for the last 9 days. The other one is a bit weirder. The other one is no porn, which sounds a bit odd, but I just feel like one area of my life where I've always, because like I work loads, I think that I've always neglected relationships and stuff. And I think that it's like a bit deep, I guess, to talk about on a podcast, perhaps. I'm not sure your audience are in for this, but like what I think is that porn is like a thing which puts off the underlying thing. It's not the real thing, is it? Let's be honest. It's not like a kind of like a relationship which grows and all that. And like, it's not. And I think that just turning that into a habit will force me to be more proactive with like girls, basically, relationships, that kind of stuff, which I think I've just always neglected.
I love that you had the guts to bring this up, because it's a topic that can go under the rug. First of all, I love that you're meditating. That's so awesome, and that makes me so happy to hear. And about the porn, it's so interesting because it's like the quick fix, right? It's like the way of scrolling for your relationships. It's the way of taking the quick route instead of something that's gonna hopefully be a long term. It's short term versus long term. So I love what you're doing, and that's really awesome, man. Like, and the fact that you say it will help other people, I'm sure, deal with the same problem. Seriously.
No, firstly, I'm no saint. I've done it for I'm on 11 days in a row. So I hopefully come 2 months, then it's something maybe I feel like I've got slightly more of a thing to say about. But it's, I don't know, hopefully I feel like it's something which, who knows? We'll see what happens. But I don't know. I haven't really got much to say. I'm kind of blabbering. But yeah,
all good.
It's an interesting habit for sure.
So switching gears slightly is, when I was doing the research for this podcast, I noticed that one thing that you said you'd get a tattoo of is what would a dead Harry do? And I thought this was so amazing. And so I want you to talk a little bit about what would a dead Harry do and why this would be your tattoo.
You're I think I've changed my mind on this. You're bringing stuff up which I can't even remember writing now. That's how good this research is. Do you remember where you read that or not?
I want to say a Hacker News AMA, but I'm not 100% sure. I went everywhere.
Okay. Well, I cannot remember. I did have a thing about getting a tattoo. I think it might have been, what would it have been? It probably was that. I probably just changed my mind on it. I think, wow. Okay, the screens, I haven't got much to say because I think this is something I probably changed my mind on, but I think that, broadly speaking, I think my tattoo today would be different. I think it would say something you probably think is really arrogant, but it would just say, "I'm Harry Dry." That would be my tattoo today, which sounds like such a bullshit thing to say, but the best scene in The Simpsons ever in my opinion, is the one where Lisa Simpson is she's really inspired by this teacher who's a part-time teacher. Can't remember what his name is, Mr. Something or other, and he has to get on this train to go away from the school, and Lisa's crying, she's really upset, and sad music's playing, so he departs on this train, and like the best teacher Lisa's ever had is leaving, and he says just before he goes, I'm going to give you something now which is all you ever need to know. So he writes up this note, scrumples it up, gives it to Lisa. The train leaves. She opens the note, and the note says, "You are Lisa Simpson." And she starts crying, I think. And since that moment, I thought that, like, if you can turn your name into, it's a little bit like, it's a bit like a really sort of simple example of this is like, do I do X or Y or Z, whatever? It should be like, I am Harry Dry, I am Lisa Simpson, whatever your name is. Therefore, it's not even a choice. I think that if you can turn your name into something you feel so sort of tied to, and so like in a way proud of, or like you've built up this currency over years and years and years of either work or like making the right decisions or like being kind or just determination, or it's like it's not even an option. You just think that when the sliding doors moment happens, you just know it's like, for example, it really is an obvious one. If I say, this is why it'd be I am Harry Dry, because let's say I was tempted to tell like a really bad lie, and then I'd look at the tattoo or I'd remember it, like I am Harry. I don't want to be the person who tells lies. So that's why it's just that constant reminder that like every little step you take in the journey is who you are as a person. That's your reputation with yourself is the most important thing. So that would be my tattoo today.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it reminds me of what you posted on your own wall when you were faced with the challenge of coding the Kanye West dating site. You posted on your wall, I am Harry Dry. Like, yeah, I might have a lot of problems to figure out, and yeah, there might be a lot of things for me to do, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to get this shit done because it just is going to get done because my name is Harry Dry. And I love that, man. And I think that if everyone can get to the point of being their own hero, this is something that Mike Posner talks about all the time, and I'm sure I've talked about on this podcast before. It's like, if you can be your own hero, then there's nothing you can't do, and then the world is your oyster, right? So massive respect for that, and it's like something that I'm going to be thinking about for the future as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's Joe Rogan said, be the superhero in your own movie, and I don't think that my name means much like right now, but hopefully when I'm 70, I look at that and I think, oh, I can do this. It's like here's an example. It's like Rafael Nadal on clay, Roland Garros. Today he just won Roland Garros for the 13th time. So when he's under pressure in a match against whoever it is, Yannick Sinner in the quarterfinals, and he's break points down, Sinner's serving for the first set, he can just remember, I'm Rafael Nadal and I've won 12 French Opens and I can do this. That's the state I was trying to get to. Not that I'm close to it yet.
And if you can have it in your mind that you're just someone who does this thing that is really great and happens to be awesome, then it becomes easier to do almost. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to touch back on marketing examples and bring it back because I want to ask you what your specific favorite example is. Because you've written so many of them over the last year and a half, and I'm curious which one stands out to you and why. It's
a good question. I think different ones for different reasons. So some I'm particularly proud of the way I wrote them, for example. But the story which I like best is a story about how Nike sold their first 30,000 shoes. It's a story about it's anyone who's read the book Shoe Dog. It's essentially like aspects of that book which are used mainly to write this story, but how Nike sold their first shoes. It was essentially Phil Knight, the founder, and Jeff Johnson, his first ever employee. And Jeff Johnson would go to these athletic track meets, and he'd have a bootload of Nike shoes, or actually they were called Blue Ribbon before Nike. They imported them from Japan as Blue Ribbon shoes in the boot of his car. And he would go up and talk to all the runners one by one, and he'd tell them about the Blue Ribbon shoes, and he'd chat to them about what race they were doing that day and what size their feet were and all that jazz. And basically, long story short, Nike's first 30,000 shoes were all sold hand by hand by this guy called Jeff Johnson, traveling up the east coast of America, driving to athletics track meets. And the reason why, what Jeff Johnson would do is he'd talk to all these runners, and he'd send them postcards asking about their 800 meter time, or like how the marathon went, and all that stuff. And word of mouth kind of took off the back of this, off the back of Jeff Johnson single-handedly, really, because Phil Knight was actually working as an accountancy job at the time. Jeff Johnson kind of built this network which just everyone loved, Blue Ribbon, which became Nike. And he would show up at people's houses and have like their Sunday lunches and chat to them about running. He was just, and I think the reason why I love the story is because a lot of companies these days think kind of wrong. I think they think that you have to be smashing Instagram, or you have to be all over YouTube, and all that stuff helps massively. But tell me a shoe company who sells 30,000 shoes more simply, even today, than just going one by one kind of round these athletic track meets, and you're shifting them manually. And I think that's lost by a lot of companies. They end up sort of hiding behind social media accounts which have no real vibrancy, and they never talk to their customers, and they all think it's going to happen magically with ads, but nothing happens magically. And that's why I like Nike's story. I think today is still quite relevant and quite forgotten, I guess.
The example of just doing things one by one. And this is exactly the same reason why I'll call anybody who follows me on Twitter, right? It's like there's a certain joy that you get from, and a certain value that comes from doing things one at a time. Because if you give someone your full attention, and like that guy did to Nike, he gave his full attention to the product and to the customer. And so that means something, and that spreads organically, you know? And I think it definitely, like you said, gets lost in today's day and age where everybody wants everything so quickly.
So just two things off what you said. I couldn't agree more. Firstly, what I've noticed is the relationships I've built with the marketing examples thing. Let's say I've spent a long time in email chains with people, or someone sends me their website and I'll send back a few bullet points of feedback about what you could change, and like never asking for any money or any of that stuff. It's nearly always those people who 2 weeks later are writing an article about marketing, and then they link marketing examples as like one of the best sites, or they share my stuff with their friends. It's literally always those people. A good example of this is that time I got featured in The Hustle. It came from this woman called Steph Smith, and she was hosting a drinks event in London. And I just thought, I don't really want to go to this thing, but I really respected what Steph was doing online. So I went to the event and became like reasonably good, or at least like reasonably good friends with Steph, like online friends. We still chat now, and I definitely see her again in person. And then she was the person who later, we kind of kept in contact, and later she was the person who put me in the Hustle's newsletter, which was sort of 4,000, 5,000 subscribers in 24 hours, which for me was huge. And it never would have happened if I didn't make a little bit of effort. And the final point I wanted to make was, there's a great quote by Paul Graham, and he writes, "Startups seed because their founders make them succeed. You can't wait for users to come to you. You have to go out and get them." And that's the Phil Knight, Jeff Johnson thing, which we're talking about. You have to make it happen. It's not going to happen for you if you're sitting behind a computer account, never talking to anyone.
All right. Well, two things off your two things. One, Steph Smith will be coming on the podcast very soon. And hopefully by the time you guys hear this, we'll have that episode out, or maybe that episode will be out soon. And secondly, I thought you were going to go with the Paul Graham quote of scaling the unscalable is the most important thing you should be doing, or something like that. But yeah,
I think his sort of line is "do things that don't scale" is his sort of really famous quote, which I think has a line by the Airbnb founders, which was, we didn't do anything manually until it became, we did everything manually until it was painful. And I think that's how I do it now. Like until it's, when you're small, like my business is, just do it manually until it becomes so painful you can no longer do it manually. People waste so much time setting up these, when it's like in company culture, it's the worst. There's meetings to set up meetings to set up meetings, and it's like, just look, someone just send the thing, someone just do it.
Mm-hmm. It's so fascinating because I notice this when I'm recording podcasts and editing them. It's like I sometimes editing the podcast, having the podcast and doing them is fun, but then editing sometimes is hard, and I'm like thinking to myself like, oh, maybe I should just like hire someone to do this. They'll be better. And then I'm like, no, like doing this is the exciting part. Like this is the boring hard work that I'll be doing forever. And I hope to be doing forever because this is the part that makes it all go and go fast how I want to go. And if I have to hire someone out, they're going to, have their own process and take a while. And then I realize like it's the joy of doing the boring hard tasks that is what makes great things happen.
Great example of this is like on LinkedIn. So basically on my newsletter, one of my call to actions, I guess, is if you want to connect, I'm down to chat on LinkedIn, basically, is what the end of the line is. It's like, if you'd like to connect on LinkedIn, feel free. So I get quite a few people who sign up to the newsletter who then get talking to me on LinkedIn. And it feels like quite an odd thing because you get in quite a few conversations, I suppose, from this. And, what someone who is thinking technically or even like mathematically might say is, oh, you should get someone to like handle these conversations for you. That's just not the way that would completely strip away everything about it. It would be like I think there's people who do this, but you wouldn't no longer be talking to me. It would just be complete bullshit. And then you'd lose the whole authenticity of what's going on. I think there's really something to staying small, I guess.
Yeah. And just the idea of being authentic and being real. And it reminds me of something that Gary Vaynerchuk has always said. And it's like, he's the one who sends the messages out. He's the one who has control over his account. He's the one who posts everything that he posts. And, that gives him a certain amount of credibility in my eyes, because even if he's not creating every piece of content, which would be basically impossible, he's the one who's saying, okay, this is what I stand for. And even at his level of where he's at, he's still doing that, and he will always do that because it's important to be authentic to him. So I think what you and I are talking about is the smaller version, the much, much, much smaller version of that. But it's just about the importance of authenticity and being real and being who you really are.
Yeah, like a real world example of this is, I can't remember who founded Pepsi, but Pepsi or even Peloton made those commercials last year, which completely like depleted the share value by half. And they were very sort of, the Pepsi one was kind of, I believe it was pretty insensitive to, I can't exactly remember exactly what happened, but essentially these sort of awful commercials, which it's sad to think that one day, at one point, there was a founder in his sort of garage who probably set up Peloton, the bike company, and he sort of lost. I'm sure he's a really successful guy. I'm not slagging him off in any stretch here, but he's lost control to such a degree where there's these people setting up this commercial, which just anyone can blindly see it's an awful idea, but you kind of lose touch with your own business in a way. It's I don't know. I mean, maybe there's an argument for it has to happen, but I don't think it would ever happen to me.
I would love to see a marketing example on that topic of just failed commercials or mistakes that companies have made, and if those have actually been failures for the company long term or in the near short term. So like a year down the line, how did this campaign affect them? I think that would be a really cool one to do if you think it is as well.
I think it's interesting that we're going slightly off topic here, but I think I'm a big believer in tomorrow's fish and chip paper. Like today's news is tomorrow's fish and chip paper. So I got earlier in the year, I posted a story about the rapper Lil Nas X and how he rose to fame. And basically I had this Twitter sort of troll, I suppose, who had she wrote something with the same title on Twitter, which was something like Lil Nas X is great at marketing. Now, I'd never seen her she wrote a thread about it, which got reasonable attention. I'd never seen her thing before, but I wrote my own kind of story about Lil Nas, which was very different to what hers was. She then I guess tried to make the point that I was plagiarizing hers or I'd stolen her ideas, and she kind of took it she took it a little bit racial, like I was like a white person appropriating a black person's work, and I was, I don't know, basically a scumbag. And then she kind of sent her followers onto me to kind of give me grief and stuff. And at the time, it felt like a big thing. But then a month later, it's tomorrow's fish and chip paper. Nobody cares. Everyone's forgotten about it, and you just have to weather the storm for a day, and that's it. I think it's probably the same with Peloton.
Wow. So let's go to that example and ask what was your reaction to that and initially getting that hate online, and how did you deal with that? And you're such a good dude. It's like I can't imagine, how you took that when you obviously didn't plagiarize.
It felt quite surreal at the start. Like I don't want to sound like it was a big thing. It wasn't a big thing, but there was probably like 1,000 messages. They got to my sponsor and tried to cancel my sponsor's account with me, saying that I was like, Marketing Examples is just an awful company or something along those lines. So it got fairly tense. But my sponsor just said, they replied saying, look, there's obviously nothing plagiarized here, just sort of like what's going on. But how did I deal with it? So I got advice from people. I messaged quite a few friends and people who I look up to, I suppose, and said, like, what should I do right now? And the default position people said is that, look, if you try and get in, it takes two morons to get involved in an argument. You can't, if I'm arguing with somebody, I'm also, then they'll argue back. It's like, it takes two to tango, you know what I mean? So they basically said, just don't completely ignore it and do not reply. And in a way, I'm not sure if it was the right decision, because I'd have liked to set the record straight. But I just thought, I'm going to write a reply here. She's then going to get inflamed even more, no matter what. There's no way I wrote a line which was, you can't use reason if you can't change an opinion with reason if reason wasn't used to form an opinion in the first place, or something like that. So no matter what I said, she was going to come back even harder and then send a bunch more of her sort of troops at me. So I just thought, I'm gonna get offline for 2 days, and I just didn't check social media for a few days. That's what I did.
I think that's the right move, and it reminds me of something that Abraham Lincoln used to do, which was during the Civil War, he had a bunch of generals that performed really badly, and he, after he died, they found a bunch of letters to these generals, but they found the letters in Abraham Lincoln's drawer, meaning he wrote them out and he actually didn't send them. So it makes me think of that example.
That's interesting. I thought it was the least risky thing to do. That's what I thought. I thought, look, I'm not going to get involved. Let's bow out online for a few days.
Yeah. So kind of changing gears slightly, is you are an incredible writer, man. And one of the reasons why you have attributed your writing skills is that you made the example of saying that if me and you write two things and we're both 5 out of 10 writers, but you spend time to revise it and edit it, you'll be a 7 out of 10 writer. And then if you revise and edit again, you'll be a 9 out of 10 writer. So talk to me about your editing process, because your writing seems so crisp and so good, and you seem to attribute that to editing. At least that's what you did on a previous interview. So talk to me about the editing process.
That's a line I do remember. Unlike the tattoo, that rings a bell. So what that is, I just to reiterate that, like, I don't consider myself to be. It's like an example here. Like, let's say you're doing a maths test, and I don't think I'm born to be a good writer. Nothing like that whatsoever. So you do 5 out of 10s in the maths test, and then one kid just says, I'll publish that. Like, I'll settle for that. And then the other kid takes it home and goes over it with his elder brother, maybe, who's better at him at maths. And they bump up the score, and then he goes to like the after school club, and he ends up getting a 9 out of 10. And I think writing should be approached with the same rigor of like a science. Like, you should turn writing into like a science. That's how you can, I think, really do better work. So what I'll do is I'll get one version I'm happy with ish, or a couple of different versions, and I will then show them to my brothers. I'm very fortunate to have brothers who are happy to read the stuff. But if you don't, I'm sure there's friends who you can replicate this with. And then I like to call them the reducers rather than the producers. So like I treat like they're producing the record, but what it actually is they're just stripping away lines which aren't required. So I think that 95% of writing is too long, and it's just people padding out or writing sentences which you can just eliminate to make the point stronger. You want to go sequentially from like point A to point B to point C, and it's got to kind of flow down. And I think people just don't get, people aren't ruthless enough, and I'm not ruthless enough. So fortunately, my brothers will comb through the work and be like, oh, look, that's got to go, that's got to go. And it can be quite brutal at times. I've had articles where they've just been like, look, I don't think this meets the standard you've set recently, and like, this shouldn't go out. And I think that's maybe like I lose a couple of days, but it's not the end of the world. I think building in this feedback loop into your work is just for me, it's just helped monumentally. It really has. I think we're not often the best judges of our own work at the time because we're so deep into it. And also, we also are too proud of our own work. So if I've spent 4 hours making a diagram, I really will not want to cut out this diagram because I've spent so long on it. I won't have the heart to cut it out. But you need someone who can just be not be attached to that diagram and be like, look, this doesn't add anything to the work. It's got to go. And that's the editing process is, really stems from that essentially.
Makes a lot of sense. I would love to see selfishly the first drafts or some of the first drafts from some of your articles, because it's, when you see the finished product of these stuff on marketingexamples.com, you just see like straight gold all over the place. It's all A+ rating, and it makes sense that it's been through so many revisions. But when you're just looking at it, it seems as if, oh, this just writing appeared like this initially. So it's very cool to hear you talk about the backstory.
Yeah, again, really flattering. Thank you very much. I think if it looks, the goal is simplicity, and I think if it looks simple, the chances are that it didn't. You want it to look like it would just came straight out your mouth, like point by point by point. But if it looks simple, there's probably a lot which went into it. I think that's I just think it's a lot about time. You know, look, if you think about it, most people writing marketing articles have a CMO or some like head of content sitting over their shoulder saying, look, you've got to get this out in 2 days, or you've just got to publish this in 2 days. So they're working 9 to 5 and they take their lunch and they've got couple of days it goes out. And I'm not saying I'm more skilled than these people. I really don't think I am. I just think that I'm basically removing those constraints. I'm saying that I'm only going to publish when I think it's good enough. And I think the final point I want to make about this is people say there's no cost to bad content. Like it's better than nothing. That's completely wrong. There really is a cost to bad. Like if you've built up a reputation over time, with maybe I feel like I have with the newsletter, and then suddenly two newsletters are bad, people are like, oh, I'm going to not open the next one because it's just this guy's not very good anymore. Or like a comedian, you watch a comedian special and you think they're good, and then they let you down. It's like, oh, I'm not going to. So there really is a cost to publishing bad stuff, and it depends what framework you're looking at it from. Because like from a purely organic search, like SEO framework, there probably isn't really. But if you're trying to build something which people buy into, podcast, song, written work, even social media posts, there really is a cost to putting bad stuff out.
You're only as good as your last performance, it makes me think of, and it certainly holds true in some of the arenas that we put our time into. So before we wrap this baby up, give everyone a little bit of parting wisdom. I like to ask my guests for some parting wisdom that they could share from their time on this earth. And I think that you've provided so much wisdom on this podcast so far, but I'm curious if you have any last bits of parting wisdom.
All right. Well, I haven't really. I'm actually going some sort of ramble and see what comes out. So I like this. I really like this quote from Derek Sivers, which is, if more information was the answer, we'd all be walking around with 6-packs and happy millionaires. So more information for most of us isn't the answer. Like you don't need to be reading all the books. You don't need to be listening to all the videos. You don't even need to be reading any of my work. You don't need to be listening to any of the podcasts. Like boil it down to more like a mineral level. And I think that what I think anyone should work on is the fundamentals. So it's like, how determined are you? How can you work from 10 to 12 and not check your phone? Do you are you someone who treats customers with like are you a scam artist? Are you someone who actually wants to provide a good product? How are you disciplined enough to get up like when you want to get up? Are you eating the right stuff? Like, are you what's your focus like? What's your mind on? Like, are you taking the easy options, the hard options? And I think that all these little kind of traits, I guess, is what I think everyone should be focused on. I don't think, let's say you want to start a business. I don't think you want to, I think that's just a function of getting all the other ducks in a row. And if you're the sort of person who, if you can build up that self-belief in your head where you just know you can do it, you're going to figure out a way of doing it. It's like Confucius, like those who think they can and those who think they can't are usually correct. And if you can just get the mentality whereby, like, I'm just going to keep going until this works. This is going to work. I'm going to make this work. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to change the idea and make something else work. That's the muscle which I think we should all be trying to develop. And that can be developed from, 101 different things. But that's what I would focus on if I'm starting out again from scratch, is just building the machine, the human being, which is going to be the one who seizes the opportunity. Instead of focusing on like more technical stuff, like read this book and check out these marketing examples. Like that's too high level. Just if you can get the right bones, you'll be able to, I don't know, whatever the hell the analogy is, but that's what I think is important.
I love it, man. And if I could retweet a statement via audio, I would retweet that because that was awesome. Tell everyone where they could find you on the internet, and thank you so much for joining us, my man.
No, seriously, I had a really good time, and actually, I don't want to tell anyone where to find me. They've heard the website, and I'm sure I don't do these things to promote or nothing like that. I think that also goes against my message. The message is like, read less books. Don't read the website. Just I don't know. Work on yourself, I guess. But yeah, good luck to these listeners.
Well, if you need marketing examples, marketingexamples.com is where you should find this man. And we really appreciate it, man.
No, thank you very much, Danny. I really enjoyed it. Cheers.
You just listened to my conversation with Harry Dry. If you enjoyed it, let me know on Twitter at HeyDannyMiranda. Feel free to sign up to my newsletter. That's Tuesday Treasure. You could find that at DannyMiranda.com/Tuesday. Thank you for listening until the final seconds. Appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. Recording this on Thanksgiving, so have a happy Thanksgiving, and just really, really appreciate you for listening. Have a great one, guys.